Okay, everybody, welcome back. We are so close to the premiere. I'm so excited. I think this is going to go live on Saturday, which means when you're listening to this, we should be one day away from the Daryl Dixon premiere. And if I'm wrong and I'm thinking about the wrong day, then I'm sorry I got it wrong. I'm just going to dive into these asks and get the rest of them that I have right now finished. I am still working on the video for Operation Lead the Walkers Away, but like I said, I'm probably not going to get that out for another week. So be patient with me. So let's start with Still as Wind. I was blocked by this account. I think I have some evidence that a Facebook fan account is being run by AMC. Ooh, this should be good. This is a recent post that had the Bethel Discord really excited. It's the same one that we talked about in the last video. Um, that had the lyrics, right? This post really leaning into Daryl looking for love, and I thought choosing to add some song lyrics was also very unusual if this is just a fan. So I decided to test the water and mention Beth. This is my comment. He needs someone he can connect with, be himself with, like he did with Beth. I went to check the comments for this post the next morning, and I was blocked. I checked in with the Discord, and they told me my comment was deleted. I was really surprised because I thought it was light enough to not scream TD, but nope. I've left Beth comments before on other accounts and nothing happened. I've even straight up said Beth was alive before. This account also has deleted offensive Carol comments in the past, but it doesn't delete a simple comment just mentioning her name. To me, this is even more proof that this is run by AMC and they really want Beth to be a surprise. What do you think? Um, yeah, I agree with you. That is very, very odd. And I think yeah, it really, because I always try to come up with things that maybe would explain it, just so that I feel like we're, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And I was going to say the only other thing it could be is maybe if it's run by a caroler, and so they didn't appreciate the Beth comment. But if they're deleting hateful Carol comments, I mean, yeah, I guess it could be like but it doesn't jive either way. If they're deleting Carol comments, then it's probably not a Carol person who's running the account. And you could always argue that they were only deleting the Carol comments that were hateful, but if that's the case, like you said, this was not a hateful comment. It was just a comment that mentioned Beth. So yeah, either way, it doesn't really make sense that they would block you and delete this unless they really don't want anything written about Beth on this post. So yeah, I don't really have a whole lot more to say, but I do agree with you, and that is super suspicious. And yeah, good on you for doing something like that so that we can point to it and say this is weird. Why did they do that? So yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, you can when she shows up, you can wear it like a badge of honor and be like, "Hey, I have proof that I knew before other people did." So yeah, thanks for sending that in. That's really, really interesting. Um, Oh, okay. There's talk about maybe Maggie going to France and the shows uniting, but isn't DC set further in the future? I actually forgot to read this YouTube comment when we were doing YouTube comments in the last video. Let me show you a YouTube comment about this. This one right here. On the Dead City timeline, Gimple gave an interview this summer when the interviewer said it was taking place in 2029. Gimple corrected the interviewer and said that any timeline information that is not directly from the show itself is all speculation. So the show is not in 2029, and basically they are intentionally keeping the timeline loose so they can do whatever they want with it. So the answer to your question really is no. It's not necessarily that far in the future. And I did talk about this before that I think that the timelines are going to sync up. So, um, Dead City, even if it's a little bit in the future, is not as far in the future as people seem to think it is. And if Maggie or Negan or whoever it is going to go to France, they're probably, I mean, what are the chances, because it is fiction and because it is part of the same universe, that three major characters, Daryl, Carol, and Maggie, are all in Europe at the same time and they don't cross paths. Now, is it realistic that they could be in Europe and not cross paths? Of course, but they would not, Gimple and Kang would not set this up and then lose an opportunity like this, right? They're doing it on purpose because they're going to cross paths. So it can't be that far in the future, what most people think. Um, on this particular subject, this is a little off topic, but I will read you this one. It says, I'm so ready for Daryl to be absolutely feral if someone tries to take Beth's blood without her permission. This is in response to me talking about, if she was cured or if the bite cure theory ends up being true and whether She would be willing to help try to find a cure, but, we might have people who are trying to do things without her permission and make a test subject out of her. And anyway, so this is a response to that. And I just wrote, me too. Feral Daryl is always a plus. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about with DC is that we noticed even in like TV spots and TV promos, they're putting Dead City and Daryl Dixon together. And I hadn't even really thought about that too much at first. I was just thinking it's just because they're the two spin-offs that are going on right now in the TWD universe. And of course, that is, the obvious reason that they would be putting them together. It's like the plausible deniability aspect. But what they'll do is like, when you do Behind the Dead and those like YouTube type videos, the first part will be about Dead City and the second part will be about Daryl Dixon, but they're doing them in the same video. And so they're even promoting them in a joint way now. They're putting them together. So clearly they're trying to get us to associate these two shows in our mind. They're going to come together at some point, right? So anyway, I hope that answers your question. I kind of hit quite a few topics in like a round robin sort of way, but the answer is that no, it's not as far in the future as you think it is, and the timeline is probably going to sync up with the Daryl Dixon timeline at some point. So yeah, that's the answer. All right, we have another one with pictures here. Let's go to the top. Here we go. Okay, so here's another strange post from one of those Facebook accounts. Daryl gets help from some local people to repair his and Carol's sailboat, shown in the teasers. Suddenly, crusty barnacle walkers come up out of the shallow coastal water to attack. Daryl shoots them. The young man, Roberto, has retrieved the boat's rudder as part of the repair effort. It's a critical part of the boat, used for steering and easily damaged. The importance of a rudder to navigation is undeniable. In the painting included here by Alvarez Sala, Prado Museum, Madrid, Spain, a survivor carries a rudder up to the Christian shrine. The people are grateful to God for saving them from drowning after a shipwreck. They have an offering of candles with prayers, and the woman on the right is reverently making the sign of the cross. Let's look at this. Oh, it's not going to show me the whole. Hold on. Okay, so here's the picture a little bit closer up. Needless to say, myself and another member of the Bethel Discord fell down a deep rabbit hole researching the church in the background. Church here. We both working independently came up with the same church. It's the Capilla de... Okay, you guys, I'm just going to slaughter that. I don't speak Spanish. So it's that church. Essentially the Church of the White Virgin. It's one of the churches on the pilgrimage of St. James that we've been theorizing about. All right, so finally, the Chapel of Atalaya, also known as the Chapel of the White Madonna, offers a glimpse into the spiritual heart of Luarca. They restored the church in 1961, and the highlight is the altarpiece of, I'm assuming that's Jesus of Nazareth, a 17th century Baroque work that hangs in the main chapel. Okay. Also on display are the figures of Santa Anna, the Virgin and the Child, known as the Virgin de la Blanca. Legend has it that sailors found them in a cave excavated by the sea. Something found in a nearby cave. And on top of that, we got chills when we realized that right behind this church is a lighthouse, too, actually. Okay. Interesting. Not sure what it all adds up to, but man, was it an interesting rabbit hole to fall down. For sure. Okay, so, I mean, the first thing on the surface, let's go back up to the beginning here, is that... So I'm assuming then, because this is still part of the post, that this was posted, like the picture, the painting was posted by the Facebook account, and they are likening this picture to what's happening here with Daryl. And again, that's not something that a fan account or a Facebook account would just come up with by itself. It has to be being fed to them by the powers that be, right? So let's read this again. I just want to go through it again. He's picking up the rudder, which is their navigation. In the painting included here, a survivor carries the rudder up to a Christian shrine. The people are grateful to God for saving them from drowning after a shipwreck. They have an offering of candles with prayers. The woman on the right is reverently making the sign of the cross. So, I mean, again, if you think about this as being, just an account by itself, they're seeing that Roberto picks up a rudder and they're going, oh, well, let's just include this random Christian painting that has to do with a rudder. Like, why would they do that? There's no reason to connect it to that unless someone has told them to connect it to that. So they are dropping hints here. Let's see if we can see this a little bit better. See, this is the rudder. I think this is the woman making the sign of the cross. And I don't know, I'll have to think about that more. The rudder is the navigation. Um, like it says, you need that to steer. And it's almost being, I almost feel like they're saying that Daryl and, okay, I think this is what they're saying. We know that they got in the boat and they're trying to get across the sea. They're trying to go home, right? But the storm hits them and they wash up in Spain. So that's how they get to Spain. And it feels like they're telling us that them washing up there was a divine intervention. That, you have to turn the rudder, like it's kind of a Jesus take the wheel thing, right? You have to turn the rudder over to God and he will get you where you need to be. And this is where Daryl needs to be in order to find Beth. I mean, that's kind of what they're saying, I think. I also want to point out that not so much the church in real life, this picture, but this one actually looks a little bit like the church that they have on the logo for the Daryl Dixon season 3 when it has that church in the background. This church looks a little bit like that. So that would be my thoughts on it. That's what I think they're trying to say. And yeah, that's that's super interesting. And you really have to read between the lines to figure that out. So yeah, great detective work there, and thank you for sending that in. That's super awesome, actually. And yeah, I bet it was fascinating. I'm glad I'm not the only one who fell down a rabbit hole this last week. So thank you again for sending that in. That's fantastic. Um, I was reading through a blog that ships Carol and Daryl, and I was really shocked to discover that they are even more delusional than we are. I have gotten over the shock of that myself. It's not that they just want to have these two characters together as a couple. They really believe that everything Daryl does is about Carol, and that Angela King for sure would have made them a couple in the canceled spinoff in New Mexico, that this was always the plan. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you about them being more delusional than us. Somebody sent me a Carol post this week, and I actually said that exact thing to them, like they call us delusional. Um, it's to me, it's beyond absurd that they would think Angela King would put Daryl and Carol together when she wrote Still. I mean, that's just delusion on a whole new level. Um, and the other thing I noticed, I mean, I don't know what this post was that you're referring to, but the one that was sent to me was from a pretty big, pretty well-known Carol blog, and it only had 4 or 5 notes on it. And I made a note of that to the person who sent it to me, and I was going, is there, I don't get in the tags, I don't look myself, I don't follow them, but is their fandom being really quiet right now? Like it doesn't, given that this is a well-known Carol blog that I've seen plenty of posts from because it's one that's quite vitriolic at times, it seems like there should be more notes on it. And it could be that they're just being quiet right now, but I also feel like maybe they're kind of accepting things a little bit, ever since the special came out where Norman was talking about how he confirmed that Daryl, was crushing on Beth and thought she liked him and all of that. I mean, of course, they exploded after that and were very angry, but now I feel like it's gotten pretty quiet. And that's not to say that it won't flare up again once the new season starts. I mean, we are still in the off season, so that could be it. But I just made note of there were not that many notes on that particular post, and that was surprising to me because most of our posts, TD's posts, have lots of interaction and lots of notes, and so our fandom is just a lot more active than theirs right now. I mean, we're having so much more fun, right? And the one reply I got was that because this particular blog is so vitriolic and so angry, she may have lost a lot of followers. I mean, people, even if they agree with her, because, it's obviously carolers that read her blog, people can only put up with that kind of negativity so long, and then they start to lose interest. So it could be that too. But when I was reading your ask here, something occurred to me. And I don't know if this is true or not, but New Mexico. So, if anyone doesn't remember, what they're referring to here is that in season was that 9? I think it was 9. Carol is on a boat and then she comes back to Daryl and they're out in the woods and they're talking and she makes the suggestion that they just leave. They just get on his bike and go see what's in New Mexico. So a lot of people thought that there was going to be a spinoff at some point where they went to New Mexico. Now, honestly, that may have been part of the plan. And what I'm wondering is if New Mexico was actually Spain. New Mexico has a climate and a landscape that is a lot like Spain. Maybe not exact, but it's got that orange desert color. I'm in Utah. I'm just above New Mexico. So I've driven down through it. I've never lived there, but I've driven down through it. And it's very hot. It's very desert-like. And it's got like the red and orange dirt, right? That's what it looks like. And that's very much what Spain looks like, especially the part of Spain that they're in. And both Norman and I think it was Zabel, I mean, the directors have talked about how different it is from France, because France is it's a different like longitude and latitude. So it's more of green and blue and gray is more what France looks like. And of course, it's a lot wetter because it's not desert-like. And how Spain is completely different. It's the oranges, the bright colors of the desert, right? Orange and yellow and red. And it just occurs to me that New Mexico had that too. So I'm wondering if back when season 9 was going on, they were planning to make it New Mexico where they went. And so it really could have been a plan to do a spinoff there, or to, even if it wasn't a spinoff back then, to do a an arc where they go to New Mexico because they were looking for that climate. But then things changed and they found out they could go to Europe. So they went to France and then they went, okay, well, we need that climate. Let's go to Spain. And so now they're in Spain. Um, so I'm just wondering if what she was referring to there was plans for the spinoff, but because things changed, they no longer were in New Mexico, they're now in Spain. Um, so New Mexico became Spain as a locale. I don't know if that's true. That's just something that occurred to me when I was reading this because I haven't thought about New Mexico for a long time. But if they had gone to New Mexico, it would have looked a lot like what Spain looks like. So, yeah, kind of interesting to think about. And I don't know if that's true. I wonder if we'll ever get an answer to that. But I hope we do. But yeah, thanks for the ask. And yeah, they're definitely more delusional than we are. And unfortunately, it's only going to get worse as, Beth shows up. So everyone brace themselves. Okay, this is the last one that I have at the time. Hi there, love your channel. I've been listening to your videos on YouTube and absolutely love your hopeful perspective on Beth's return. So inspiring and fun. Thank you for keeping the hope alive. You're welcome. Even if we're wrong, if you don't have hope, what's the point of living? Exactly. Thank you for that. I was just curious as to when you think the moment was that Daryl fell in love with Beth. Even if he didn't fully understand it at the time, in your perspective, what do you think pushed him to realize he looked at her as something more? I loved how Norman recently said Daryl misread the situation, referring to thinking Beth could have had a crush on him or boyfriend girlfriend things. So random, so random for him and Melissa to bring up Beth, considering it's been so long. There has to be a reason for it. Thanks for all you do, and I'll be asking more questions. Love picking your brain, praying for Beth's return. Thank you. What a lovely ask. Wow, the moment, huh? I don't. Oh, that's a hard one to answer because there were so many moments before that, like you said, he might not have fully come to it yet. So, Norman and some of the others have said that about Daryl. If he had feelings for her, he didn't understand them. So there were moments that I think they were building it up, but he might not have even been consciously aware of it. So even if you go back to season 3, a big one for me, and again, I'm not sure he was consciously aware of this, but a big one is 301, I think, or maybe 302. No, I think it's 301. Right after they take the prison and Beth is singing by the fire and he's looking at her. That's a big one for me because that's right after they effectively shut down the idea of Daryl and Carol. Like they literally told us in that scene, this is not going to happen. Um, and then when she's singing, he is staring at her. And so he's very drawn to her. And then we see him looking at her again later in the season when she's singing at the prison, when they're indoors and when Merle is there. And I've talked about that plenty of times before, how I really love that scene. So there's that. And there's when he leaves with Merle, Beth talks to Carol, which this is more about Carol, or I mean, Beth and Daryl, but how there's, a lot of people think she was kind of crushing on him then. So there's kind of hints of it in season 3. Um, but you ask specifically what moment do you think Daryl fell in love with Beth, even if he doesn't understand it at the time. What do you think pushed him to realize he looked at her as something more? I think I think that it would probably have to be in Alone. I mean, what happened in Still was really beautiful, and it was them connecting on a very deep level. But I don't know that he was necessarily thinking romance at the time. It was more about healing their trauma, right, and moving forward. So I do think that his feelings toward her changed a little bit in Still, not necessarily in the romantic sense, but in the way he looked at her. You know, before he was so robotic and he was so shut down, and she kind of brought him out of his shell and he started to trust her. And we see him smile at the end. So I think there's some affection there. But I don't think he was necessarily thinking, more than that until we see Alone. But at the same time, it's hard to know exactly when it happened because the first scene that we see in Alone is when she's got the crossbow and he's teaching her and he keeps touching his face. And if you've looked into the psychology of that at all, when men are attracted to a woman, they tend to touch their faces. And so it's just like a very common psychology that you see. So at that point, he was already attracted to her, but did he realize it or was that something he was doing unconsciously? I don't know. I would say to me, a big one was always when she held his hand. Because he looks down at her and he looks down at his hand and he looks like he's freaking out a little bit, like, oh my gosh, she's holding my hand. But I feel like that could have been a little bit of a shift when that happened. And then I feel like by the time they get to the funeral home and he's watching her play the piano and sing, I feel like it's already kind of happened then. And then he communicated it to her over dinner. So I don't know. I know that I'm totally not answering your question, but I don't know when it was. I feel like they did such a good job with it being so gradual. I mean, obviously, if we were in his head, if this was a book and we knew his thoughts, then at some point it would become a conscious thought for him. And I don't know when that is. Like they didn't really tell us when that is, but we see it through his behavior slowly over time. So I don't know. I think it would be really lovely if at some point Daryl actually told us what it was. When this happened, then I knew, or something. I don't know if they will, and certainly they're not going to until she returns and they're actually talking about it and talking about her. But yeah, I don't know. I guess if I had to guess, I would go with the handhold, but I honestly don't even know if that's it. So I hope that helps. I don't know if it does. But yeah, I agree that them talking about Beth would not make any sense. Let's just rehash a crush that happened 10 years ago and doesn't mean anything. Like they wouldn't do that if there wasn't something it was leading to. Um, so yeah, I look forward to more of your questions. Let's just put it that way. All right, guys, I'm gonna cut it off there, and yeah, we're gonna get the new episode really soon. Obviously, I will do an analysis of that, and then I will get the whole big monster about Operation Lead the Walkers Away out as soon as I can. So wish me luck on that and be patient with me, and I will talk to you really soon.